in a bit of a weird mood today. So I'm gonna, read a chapter and then go eat my lunch. It might be because I haven't eaten lunch yet. I had breakfast pretty late. God knows, moods are weird. Also, I think it's partly because I just realized that I had plans for today. And I was like, what? Now I have to plan around a plan? No. Though, they might get postponed because it's, like, really hot outside. Really hot for me is above 70 degrees, basically. High 70s, okay? Yeah, I think that's what threw me off. I realized, I was like, oh my god, it's Mother's Day. And yesterday, I asked Mom if she would go on a walk with me. Not because I remembered it was Mother's Day, but because I'd gone on a walk yesterday myself, and I was like, I should do this again. But yeah, I think it's warmer today than it was yesterday, so maybe we'll try to go on a walk tomorrow. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why my brain's being weird. It's probably a combination of that and, you know, small breakfast, later lunch, even though it's only 12:30. Alright, Chapter 8, East. Soliard snored. Yet another reason Truda had been a fool to pledge herself to him. Not that Niklaus, I can't remember how I used to pronounce his name now. Niklaus. Whatever. Not that Niklaus would have been able to sleep even if his guest had shut up, for a typhoon had blown in. Thunder rumbled, making a hoarse whinny outside. Drunk on a single cup of wine, Soliard slept through it all. Niklaus lay on his bedding, slightly drunk himself. He and Soliard had spent the evening playing cards and exchanging stories. Soliard had been told the gloomy tale of the Never Queen, while Niklaus chose the more uplifting charms of Carbuncle and Scald. That sounds cute. He still had no liking for Soliard, but he owed it to Truda to protect her secret companion. He owed it to Jan. The vice of grief snapped closed around his heart. He shut his eyes, and he was back to that autumn morning when they had met for the first time, in the rose garden of the Brickstad Palace, where the court of the newly crowned Edvard II was ripe with opportunity. In his early 20s, when he was still Marquess of Zeder, Jannart had been tall and striking, with magnificent red hair that rippled to the small of his back. Ooh. In those days, Niklaus had been one of the few men to have a mane of fairest auburn, more gold than copper. That was what had drawn Jannart to him that day. Rose gold, he had dubbed it. He'd asked Niklaus if he might paint his portrait, thus capturing the shade for posterity, and Niklaus, like any vain young courtier, had only been too pleased to oblige. Red hair in a rose garden, that was how it had begun. Ooh, I like that. I think that's getting a highlight. It's pretty. They'd spent the whole season together with the easel and music and laughter for company. Even after the portrait was finished, they had stayed joined at the hip. Niklaus had never been in love before. It was Jannart who had been intrigued enough to paint him, but soon Niklaus had longed for the ability to paint him in return, so that he might capture the darkness of those lashes and how the sun glowed in his hair, and the elegance of his hands on the harpsichord. He had gazed at his silken lips and the place where his jaw met his neck. He had watched his blood throbbing there, in that cradle of life. He had imagined in exhilarating detail how his eyes would look in the morning light, when sleep made their lids heavy, that exquisite dark amber like the honey made by black bees. Ooh! He had lived to hear that voice, deep and mellow. Oh, he could sing ballads of its tenor, and the way it climbed to the height of passion when the conversation leaned towards art or history. Those subjects had set a fire in Jannart, drawing people to its warmth. With words alone he could beautify the dullest object, or bring civilizations rising from the dust. For Niklaus he had been a sun-ray, illuminating every facet of his world. He had known there was no hope. After all, Jannart was a marquess, heir to a duchy, and the dearest friend of Prince Edvard, while Niklaus was an upstart from Rosenton. And yet Jannart had seen him. He had seen him, and he had not looked away. Outside the house the waves crashed on the fence again. Niklaus turned onto his side, aching all over. "Jan," he said softly, "when did we get so old?" The Mentish shipment was due any day now, and when it turned homeward, Selyard would be with them. A few more days, and Niklais would be rid of this living reminder of Trude engine art and the saint-forsaken Inish court. He'd go back to tinkering with potions in his jailhouse at the edge of the world, exiled and unknown. Love that. Nope, highlighted too much. At the edge of the world. I always love that phrase, though, so... It keeps highlighting the next part of the paragraph because the first part ends halfway through the page and my finger was on the side. At last he dozed off, cradling the pillow to his chest. When he stirred awake, it was still dark, but the hairs on his neck stood to attention. He sat up, peering into the black. Selyard. No reply. Something moved in the darkness. Selyard, is that you? When the lightning cast the silhouette into relief, he stared at the face in front of him. Honored Chief Officer, he croaked, but he was already being towed out of bed. Poor guy. 2 sentinels bundled him toward the door. In the chokehold of terror, he somehow snatched his cane from the floor and swung with all his might. It cracked like a whip into one of their cheeks. He only had a moment to relish his accuracy before he was struck back with an iron truncheon. Ooh! Ow! He had never felt so much pain at once. His bottom lip split like fruit. Every tooth trembled in its socket. His stomach heaved at the coppery tang on his tongue. The sentinel raised his truncheon again and dealt him a terrible blow to the knee. Ow! You can't really walk without those. With a cry of mercy, Niklais raised his hands over his head, dropping the cane. A leather boot snapped it in two. Blows rained down from all sides, striking his back and his face. He fell onto the mats, making weak sounds of submission and apologies. The house was being pulled to shreds around him. The din of breaking glass came from the workroom, his apparatus worth more coin than he would ever have again. Please. Blood slavered down his chin. Honored sentinels, please, you don't understand the work. Ignoring his pleas, they marched him into the storm. All he wore was his nightshirt. His ankle was too tender to carry him, so they hauled him like a sack of millet. Ugh. The few Ments who worked through the night were emerging from their dwellings. Dr. Roos, one of them called. What's happening? Niklais gaped for breath. Who's that? His voice was lost to the sound of thunder. Musty, he shouted thickly. Musty, help me, you fox-haired fool. A hand covered his bloody mouth. He could hear Selyard now somewhere in the darkness crying out. Niklais! He looked up, expecting to see Musty, but it was Panaya who ran into the fray. She somehow got between the sentinels and stood before Niklais like the Knight of Courage. If he is under arrest, she said, then where is your warrant from the honored governor of Cape Hissan? Niklais could have kissed her. The chief officer was standing nearby, watching the sentinels ransack the house. Go back inside, he said to Panaya, not looking at her. The learned Dr. Roos deserves respect. If you harm him, the High Prince of Mentendon will hear of it. The Red Prince has no power here. Panaya squared up to him. Niklais could only watch in awe as the woman in the sleep robe faced down the man in armor. While the Mentish live here, they have the all-honored warlord's protection. She said, what will he say when he hears you spilled blood in Orissima? At this, the chief officer stepped closer to her. Perhaps he will say that I was too merciful, he said, his voice thick with contempt, for this liar has been hiding a trespasser in his home. Panaya felt silent. Shock writ plain on her. Panaya, Niklais whispered, I can explain this. Niklais, she breathed. Oh, Niklais, you've defied the great edict. His ankle throbbed. Where will they take me? Panaya glanced nervously toward the chief officer who was bellowing at his sentinels. To the honored governor of Cape Hissan. They'll suspect you of having the red sickness. She murmured in Mentish. Suddenly she tensed. Did you touch him? Niklais thought back, frantic. No, he said, no, not his bare skin. You must tell them so. Swear it on your saint, she told him. If they suspect you are deceiving them, they will do all they can to wrest the truth from you. Torture? Sweat was beading on his face. Not torture. You don't mean torture, do you? Enough, the chief officer barked. Take this traitor away. With that, the sentinels carried Niklais off like meat for the chop. I want a lawyer, he shouted. Damn you, there must be a decent, bloody lawyer somewhere on this saint-forsaken island. When nobody responded, he called out desperately to Panaya, Tell Musty to mend my apparatus. Continue the work. She looked on, helpless. "And protect my books! For the love of the saint, save my books, Panaya!" Was he looking for the cure to the red sickness? I should remember this. That was a short chapter. I guess we're doing 2. All right. Chapter 9, West. "I suppose one cannot often go for walks like these in Ursur. The heat would be intolerable." They were walking in the privy garden. Ede had never entered it before. This retreat was reserved for the pleasure of the queen, her ladies of the bedchamber, and the Virtues' Council. Lady Arbella Glen was still confined to bed. The court was alive with whispers. If she died, then a new lady of the bedchamber would be needed. The other ladies of the privy chamber were already striving to showcase their wit and talent to Sabran. No doubt it was why Lenora had been so vexed when Ede had, in her eyes, botched the storytelling. She had not wanted her chances dented by association. "Not in winter. In the summer we wear loose silks to stave off the heat," Ede answered. "When I lived in His Excellency's estate in Brumilabar, I would often sit by the pool in the courtyard and read. There were sweet lemon trees to shade the walkways, and fountains to cool the air. It was a peaceful time." In truth, she'd only been there once. She had spent her childhood in the priory. "I see." Sabran held an ornate fan. "And you would pray to the dawn singer?" "Yes, madam, in a house of silence." They wandered into one of the orchards where the greengage trees were in full bloom. Greengage, interesting. Plum, a sweet greenish fruit resembling a small plum. I haven't heard that word before. That's cool. 12 knights of the body followed at a distance. Over the last few hours, Ede had discovered that beneath her all-knowing exterior, the Queen of Innis had a circumscribed view of the world. You didn't realize this already? Sealed behind the walls of her palaces, her knowledge of the lands beyond Innis came from wooden globes and letters from her ambassadors and fellow sovereigns. She was fluent in Iskali and Harathi, and her tutors, I don't know why I said it like that, and her tutors had educated her in the history of virtudom, but she knew little of anything else. Ede could sense she was straining not to ask questions about the South. I suppose she doesn't need to know much else. The Ursur did not adhere to the 6 virtues. Neither did its neighbor, the domain of Lacia, despite its important place in the Innish founding legend. Ede had undergone her public conversion to the 6 virtues not long after she came to court. One spring evening she had stood in the sanctuary royal, proclaimed her allegiance to the house of Berethna, and received the spurs and girdle of a worshipper of Gallion. It's weird objects, but okay. In return, she was promised a place in Helgoland, the heavenly court. 'Cause you gotta have motivation. She had told the Arch-Sanctarian that before her arrival in Innis she had believed in the Dawn Singer, the most widely followed deity in the Ursur. No one had ever questioned it. Ede had never followed the Dawn Singer. Though she had Ursuri blood, she had not been born in the Ursur, and had not often set foot in it. Her true creed was known only to the Priory. I love learning more about this. It's like tiny pieces, and I'm like, yes, tell me more. His Excellency told me that your mother was not from Ursur, Sabran said. No, she was born in Lacia. What was her name? Zala. I am sorry for your loss. Thank you, madam, Ede said. It was a long time ago. No matter the differences between them, they both knew what it was to lose a mother. As the clock tower struck 11, Sabran stopped beside her private aviary. She unlatched the door, and a tiny green bird hopped onto her wrist. These birds are from the Oluma Mountains, she said. Sunlight danced in the emeralds around her neck. They often spend their winters there. Have you ever been to Lacia, Majesty? Ede said. No, I could never leave virtudom. Ede felt that familiar twist of irritation. It was hypocrisy at its finest for the Innish to use Lacia as a cornerstone of their founding legend, only to deride its people as heretics. Of course, she said. Sabran glanced at her. She took a pouch from her girdle and poured a few seeds into her palm. In Innis, this bird is called the Lovejay, she said. The bird on her wrist gave a merry chirp. They take only one partner all their lives, and will know their song even after many years apart. That is why the Lovejay was sacred to the Knight of Fellowship. These birds embody his desire for every soul to be joined in companionship. I know them well, Eid said. The bird pecked up the seeds. In the south they are called peach-faced mimics. Peach-faced. A peach is a sweet orange fruit, madam, with a stone at its core. It grows in the Ursur in some parts of the east. Sabran watched the bird eat. Let us not speak of the east, she said, and returned it to its perch. The sun was hot as a stove, but the queen showed no sign of wanting to go inside. Me looking out my window. They continued their stroll down a path flanked by cherry trees. Do you smell smoke, mistress? Sabran asked. That is the smell of a fire in the city. This morning 2 doom singers were burned in Marion Square. Do you think that this is well? Doom singers. That's a cool name. There were 2 kinds of heretic in Innis. A scattered few still followed the primordial religion of Innis, a form of nature worship that had been practiced before the foundation of the House of Berethnet, in the days when knighthood was still young and the country had been haunted by the Lady of the Woods. Ooh, I like that. I love some good backstory. Right. They could recant or be imprisoned. Then there were the ones who prophesied the return of the Nameless One. For the last 2 years, these doomsingers had trickled into Innis from Iskalin and preached in the cities for as long as they could. They were burned by decree of the Duchess of Justice. It is a cruel death, Eid said. They would see Innis consumed by flame. They would have us open our arms to the Nameless One to take him as our god. Lady Igraine says that we must do to our enemies what they would do to us. Do the saint also say this, madam? Eid said calmly. I am not as well versed in the 6 virtues as yourself. The Knight of Courage commands us to defend the faith. Yet you accepted a gift from the Prince Albrecht of Mentendon, who trades with the East. He even gave you an Eastern pearl. Eid said. One might say that he is funding heresy. It was out before she could stop it. Sabran gave her a glacial look. I am not a sectarian, responsible for teaching you the complexities of the 6 virtues, she said. If you wish to dispute those complexities, Mistress Durian, I advise you to look elsewhere. In the Durn Tower, perhaps, with others who question my judgment, which comes, as I am sure I need not remind you, from the saint himself. She turned away. Good morrow. Starting not to like her very much. I mean, she's an interesting character, but she's annoying me, because she's so narrow-minded. I mean, I'm sure that is what she's supposed to be and what she's supposed to do, but, like, ma'am. Definitely for a little while there, I thought she was more of a main character, sort of. I don't know. This is what's interesting about this book, too, is it's not, like, as clearly delineated who's doing what and who's on whose side. It's not about sides, but I'm on the side of the dragons, kind of. And on the side of the Priory, because, I'm curious about it, and because secret societies fascinate me. And magic, of course. And not Sabran stuff. Like, you can't kill ideas. Like, they're still good. I don't know. Something about heresy seems hypocritical. Well, exactly. It's hypocritical, that's the thing. She strode away, shadowed by her Knights of the Body, leaving Eid alone beneath the trees. When the queen was out of sight, Eid crossed the lawn and sat on the edge of a fountain, cursing herself. The heat was making her irrational. She splashed her face with the water and then drank it from cupped palms, watched by a statue of Carnelian I, the flower of Ascalon, 4th queen of the House of Berethnet. Soon the dynasty would have ruled Innis for 1,006 years. Eid closed her eyes and let the runnels of water trickle down her neck. 8 years she had spent at the court of Sabran IX, and all that time she had never said anything to nettle her. Now she was like a viper, unable to keep her tongue in her mouth. Something made her want to rile the Queen of Innis. She had to cut that something out, or this court would eat her whole. Yeah, that's the thing too about courts. I would never survive in a court. I'm too blunt for that shit, and I'm very bad at, like, social games and politics and stuff. Her duties that day went by in a haze. The warmth made their errands all the harder. Even Lenora was subdued, her golden hair dampened by sweat, and Rosalind Crest spent the afternoon fanning herself with rising fury. After supper, Ede joined the other women in the Sanctuary of Virtues for Orisons. Orisons? Yeah. The Queen Mother... The Queen Mother had ordered the blue stained glass windows to be set into the hall to make it look as if it had been built underwater. Ooh, that's cool. There was one statue in the sanctuary on the right side of the altar. Gallion Berthnet, his hands folded on the hilt of Ascalon. On the left there was only a plinth in the memory of the woman the Inish knew as Queen Cleoland, the damsel. The Inish had no record of what Cleoland had looked like. All images of her, if they had ever existed, had been destroyed after her death, and no Inish sculptor had ever attempted to create a likeness since. Many believed it was because King Gallion had been unable to bear seeing the woman he had lost to the childbed. Even the priory had only a few accounts of the mother. So much had been destroyed or lost. As the others prayed, so too did Ede. Mother, I beg you, guide me in the land of the deceiver. Mother, I implore you, let me comport myself with dignity in the presence of this woman who calls herself your descendant, who I have sworn to guard. Mother, I pray you give me courage worthy of my cloak. Ooh, so a cloak is like a signifier of sort of rank or acceptance or being part of the priory. Sabran rose and touched the statue of her forebear. As she and her ladies filed from the sanctuary, Ede caught sight of Truda. She was looking straight ahead, but her hands were clasped a little too tightly. When night fell and she had seen to her duties in the Queen Tower, Ede descended the privy stair to the postern, where barges brought goods to the palace from the city and waited in an alcove that held the well. Truda at Zeder joined her, cloaked and hooded. I am forbidden to be out of the coffer chamber after dark without a chaperone. She tucked a wayward lock of red into her hood. If Lady Olivia discovers I am gone— You met your lover many times, my lady, presumably, Ede said, without a chaperone. Dark eyes watched from beneath the hood. What is it you want? I want to know what you and Sulyard were planning. You reference a task in your letters. It is none of your concern. Permit me then to present a theory. I have seen enough to know that you take an unusual interest in the East. I think you and Sulyard meant to cross the abyss together for some mischievous purpose, but he went ahead without you. Am I wrong? You are. If you must continue to meddle, then you may hear the truth. Truda sounded almost bored. Triam is gone to the Milk Lagoon. We mean to live together as companions, where neither Queen Sabran nor my father can take issue with our marriage. Do not lie to me, my lady. You show an innocent face to the court, but I think you have another. The postern opened. They pressed themselves deeper into the alcove as a guard came through with a torch whistling. She marched up the privy stair without seeing them. I must go back to the coffer chamber, Truda said under her breath. I had to find 16 comfits for that loathsome bird. It will raise a stink if I am gone for long. Tell me what you were plotting with Sulyard, then. And if I do not tell you? Truda let out a huff of laughter. What will you do, Mistress Durian? Perhaps I'll tell the principal secretary that I suspect you of conspiring against Her Majesty. Remember, child, that I have your letters. Or perhaps, Ede said, I must use another means to make you talk. Truda narrowed her eyes. This is not courteous speech, she said softly. Who are you? Why do you take such an interest in the secrets of the Inish court? Caution flashed across her face. Are you one of Coombe's intelligencers, is that it? I hear he makes spies of the basest sorts. All you need to know is that I make it my business to protect Her Majesty. You are a chamberer, not a knight of the body. Haven't you some sheets to strip? Ede stepped closer. She was half a head taller than Truda, whose hand now strayed to the knife on her girdle. I may not be a knight, Ede said, but when I came to this court I swore that I would protect Queen Sabran from her enemies. And I took the same oath, said Truda hotly. I am not her enemy, and neither are the people of the East. They despise the Nameless One as we do. The noble creatures they worship are nothing like worms. She drew herself up. Draconic things are waking, Ede. Soon they will rise, the Nameless One and his servants, and their wrath will be terrible. And when they rally against us, we will need help to fight them. A chill went through Ede. You want to broker a military alliance with the East, she murmured. You want to call their worms to help us deal with the awakenings. Truda stared her out, her eyes bright. Fool, headstrong fool, when the Queen discovers you wish to deal with worms. They are not worms, they're dragons, and they're gentle creatures. I've seen pictures of them, read books about them. Eastern books. Yes, their dragons are one with air and water, not fire. The East has been estranged for us so long we have forgotten the difference. When Eid only looked at her in disbelief, Trita tried a different attack. As a fellow outsider in this country, hear me. What if the Inish are wrong, and the continuation of the House of Berthnet is not what keeps the Nameless One at bay? What are you prattling about, child? You know something has changed. The draconic creature's awakening, the breaking away of Iskalin from Virtudom, these events are only the beginning. Her voice dropped low. The Nameless One is coming back, and I believe he is coming soon. For a moment, Eid was speechless. What if the continuation of the House of Berthnet is not what keeps the Nameless One at bay? How had a young woman of Virtudom come to this heretical conclusion? Of course, she might well be right. The princess had said as much to Eid before she came to Innis, explaining why a sister must be sent to guard Queen Sabran. There we go, information! The House of Berthnet may protect us from the Nameless One, or it may not. There is no proof either way, just as there is no proof to say whether the Berthnet queens are indeed descendants of the mother. If they are, their blood is sacred, and it must be protected. She could see the prioress now. Wait, was it prioress? Sorry, it said prioress, not princess. My bad. Makes more sense. That is the problem with stories, child. The truth in them cannot be weighed. That was why Eid had been sent to Innis, to protect Sabran in case the myth was true and her blood would prevent the enemy from rising. And you mean us to prepare for his second coming, Eid said, feigning amusement. Trita lifted her chin. I do. The Easterners have many dragons that live alongside humans that do not answer to the Nameless One, she said. How do you know that? Since he hasn't risen yet. When he returns, we will need those Eastern dragons to defeat him. We must stand together to prevent a second grief of ages. Trium and I will not let humankind walk to its extinction. We may be small, and we may be young, but we will shake the world for our beliefs. Whatever the truth, this girl had swallowed the torch of delusion. I love that phrase. Oh my goodness. How is it you are so certain the Nameless One will come? Eid asked. Are you not a child of Virtudom, born to believe that Queen Sabran keeps him chained? Trita straightened. I love Queen Sabran, she said, but I am no green child to believe what I am told without proof. The Inish may have blind faith, but in Mentadon we value evidence. Nice. And you have evidence that the Nameless One will return, or is this guesswork? Not guesswork. Hypothesis. Whatever your hypothesis, your plot is heresy. Do not speak to me of heresy, Trita shot back. Did you not once worship the Dawn Singer? My beliefs are not in question here. Eid paused. So, that is where Silliard is gone, on some mad-born quest in the East, trying to broker an impossible alliance on behalf of a queen who knows nothing about it. She sank onto the lip of the well. Your lover will die in this attempt. No, the Seekanese will listen. He is not an official ambassador from Innis. Why should they ever hear him out? Trium will persuade them. No one speaks from the heart as he does. Oh, sweet summer child. And once the Eastern rulers are convinced of the threat, we will go to Queen Sabran, and she will see the necessity of an alliance. The child was blinded by her passion. Silliard would be executed the moment he set foot in the East, and Sabran would sooner cut off her own nose than strike up an alliance with worm lovers, even if she could be persuaded to believe the Nameless One might rise while she drew breath. The North is weak, Trita plowed on, and the South is too proud to treat with Virtudom. Her cheeks were flushed. You dare to judge me for seeking help elsewhere. Eid looked her in the eye. You may think yourself the only one who seeks to protect this world, she said, but you have no idea of the foundation upon which you stand. None of you does. When Trita knitted her brow, Eid said, Silliard asked for your help. What have you done to assist him from here? What plans have you made? Trita was silent. If you have done anything to aid his mission, it is treason. I shall not speak another word. Trita pulled away. Go to Lady Olivia if you like. First you'll have to explain what you were doing in the coffer chamber. As she made to leave, Eid closed a hand around her wrist. You wrote a name in the book. She said Niklais. I think it refers to Niklais Roos, the anatomist. Trita shook her head, but Eid saw a spark of recognition in her eyes. What has Roos to do with all this? Before Trita could answer, a wind rushed through the grounds. Every branch quivered on every tree. Oh, is it dragon time? Every bird in the aviary ceased its singing. Eid released her hold on Truda and stepped out of the alcove. Cannons were firing in the city. Muskets went off with sounds like chestnuts bursting on a fire. Beside her, Truda stayed beside the well. "What is that?" she said. Eid breathed in as her blood pounded. It had been a long time since this feeling had swept through her body. For the first time in years, her Sidon had been kindled. I remember looking this up before, but I can't remember what it is. Sidon, not side. I assume that is a part of her magic or something. Because I don't think that's a real word. Or an actual. That's not in English. Okay. Something was coming. If it had got this far, it must have found a way through the coastal defenses. Or destroyed them. What coastal defenses? Cannons? I feel like that's not enough to stop a dragon. But, you know, what do I know? A flare like the sun breaking through clouds so hot it parched her eyes and lips, and a worm soared over the curtain wall. It burned away the archers and musketeers and smashed a line of catapults to splinters. Truda sank to the ground. Eid knew what it was from its magnitude alone. A high western. A monster from its teeth to the bullwhip of its tail, where lethal spikes jutted. Its battle-scarred abdomen was rusted brown, but the bulk of it was black as tar. Arrows sliced from watchtowers and clattered off its scales. Arrows were useless. Muskets were useless. It was not just any worm, not just any high western. No one living had laid eyes on this creature, but Eid knew its name. Faradell. Is that going to be the end of the chapter? Oh, thank God! Okay, I'm gonna highlight that line because that was so cool. Flare like the sun breaking through clouds, so hot it parched her eyes and lips, and a worm soared over the curtain wall. The fact that just, like, not even, like, I don't know if it's, like, actively breathing fire, but the fact that there is, like, it turns that hot just in a radius of it. Oh my God, that's fascinating. That is so cool. Because they must be pretty far from the curtain wall. Or if not far, then like under it. You know, that thing must be pretty tall. So cool. He who had called himself the right wing of the Nameless One. Oh wait. Are they sentient? How did I forget that they were sentient? Because brain being weird, that's why. Okay. Faradell, who had bred and led the draconic army against humankind in the grief of ages. He was awake. The beast wheeled over Ascalon Palace, casting the lawns and orchards into shadow. Eid sickened, and her skin burned, as his smell inflamed the Sidon in her blood. What is happening? Her long bow was out of reach in her chamber. Years of routine had blunted her vigilance. Faradell landed on the Dern Tower. His tail coiled serpentine around it, and his claws found purchase on its roof. Tiles crumbled away, forcing guards and retainers far below to scatter. His head was crowned with two cruel horns. Eyes like pits of magma blazed out of the dark. Sabran Queen! The sky itself echoed his words. Half of Ascalon must be able to hear them. Seed of the Shield Heart! More stone fell from the tower. Arrows skittered off his armor. Come forth and face your enemy of old, or watch your city burn. Oh, fuck. Sabran would not answer his call. Someone would stop her. The Virtues Council would send a representative to treat with him. Faradell exposed his gleaming... I skipped forward! Because there's so much happening. Okay, I guess I need to make it a little bigger. Make the font a little bigger so I don't skip as much. Okay. Faradell exposed his gleaming metal teeth. Metal. Ooh. The alabastrine tower was too high for Eid to see its uppermost balcony, but her newly tuned ears picked up on a second voice. I'm here, abomination. Eid froze. The fool. The utter fool. By emerging, Sabran had signed her own death warrant. Screams rang from every building. Courtiers and servants were leaning out of open windows to behold the evil in their midst. Others ran pell-mell for the palace gates. Eid charged up the privy stair. "So you have awakened, Firidel," Sabran said with contempt. "Why have you come here?" "I have come to give you a warning, Queen of Innis. The time to choose your side is near." Firidel let out a hiss that raised goose flesh all over Eid. It's not in all caps anymore in that interesting font. Oh well. "My kin are stirring in their caves. My brother, Orsul, has already taken wing, and our sister, Valesa, will soon follow. Before the year is out, all our followers will have awakened. The Draconic army will be reborn." "Damn your warnings," Sabran hit back. "I do not fear you, lizard. Your threats have as much weight as smoke." Eid heard their words like thunder in her head. The fumes that rose from Firidel were grindstones on her senses. Why is she reacting like this? Is it specifically to this dragon, or to dragons in general? "My master stirs in the abyss," he said, tongue flickering. "The 1,000 years are almost done. Your house was our great enemy before, Sabran Berthnet, in the days you call the grief of ages. My ancestors showed you Innish metal then, and I will show it to you now," Sabran retorted. "You speak of 1,000 years, worm. What deceit does your forked tongue sell?" Has it not been 1,000 years? It's been 1,006, I think. Isn't that what, I think that's what Eid said, well not said, but you know. Her voice was naked steel. "That is for you to discover ere long." The worm stretched out his neck so his head closed down on the other tower. "I offer you one chance to pledge your fidelity to my master and name yourself Flesh Queen." What the fuck? That's creepy! Flesh Queen as opposed to Scale Queen? Could they have thought of nothing better? Flesh Queen. Ew! That sounds nasty. Fire roared behind his eyes. "Come with me now. Give yourself up. Choose the right side, as Iskalin has. Resist, and you will burn." Eid looked to the clock tower. She could not reach her bow, but she had something else. "Your lies will take root in no Innish heart. I am no King Sigasso. My people know that your master will never wake while the bloodline of the saint continues. If you think I will ever name this country the Draconic Queendom of Innis, you will be bitterly disappointed, worm." "You claim your blood..." No, sorry, that's definitely not a dragon voice. "You claim your bloodline shields this realm," Firidel said, "and yet you have stepped out to meet me." His teeth burned red-hot in his mouth. "Do you not fear my flame?" "The saint will protect me." Even the most god-drunk fool could not believe Sir Gallion Berthnet would extend a hand from the heavenly court and shield them from a belly full of fire. But Eid's gonna protect her, and she's gonna call that the saint, right? Do we see where this is going? "You speak to one who knows the weakness of the flesh. I slew Sabran the Ambitious on the first day of the grief. Your saint," Firidel said, mouth smoking, "did not protect her. Bow to me, and I will spare you the same end. Refuse, and you will join her now." If Sabran answered, Eid did not hear it. Wind rushed in her ears as she tore across the sundial garden. The archers hit Firidel with arrow after arrow, but not one pierced his scales. Does he have no wings? I suppose he doesn't have wings. I feel like, yeah, I don't think he does. Because I was about to be like, go for the wings, y'all. Sabran would keep goading Firidel until he torched her. The blockhead must really think the wretched saint would protect her. Blockhead indeed. Eid ran past the alabastern tower. Debris cascaded from above, and a guard fell dead before her. Cursing the weight of her gown, she reached the royal library, flung open his door, and wove her way between the shelves until she hit the entrance to the clock tower. She cast off her cloak, unbuckled her girdle. Up the winding steps she went, higher and higher. Outside, Firidel still taunted Sabran. Eid stopped in the belfry where the wind howled through the arched windows and took in the impossible scene. The Queen of Innis was on the uppermost balcony of the alabastern tower. It stood just southeast of the Durn Tower, where Firidel was poised to kill. Worm on one building, Queen on the other. In her hand was the ceremonial blade that represented Escalon, the true sword. Useless. "Leave this city and harm no soul," she called, "or I swear by the saint whose blood I carry, you will face a defeat beyond any the house of Berthnet has ever exacted on your kind." Firidel bared his teeth again, but Sabran dared to take another step. Before I leave this world, I will see your kind thrown down, sealed forever in the chasm of the mountain. Fyrdal reared up and opened his wings. Maybe his wings are also shielded. God knows. Or, yeah. Faced with this behemoth, the Queen of Innis was smaller than a poppet. Still, she did not balk. Oh, the blind faith. The worm had bloodlust in his eyes. They burned as hot as the fire in his belly. Ede knew she had moments to decide what to do next. It would have to be a wind warding. Wardings like this used a great deal of Sidon, and she had so very little left. Oh, right, she had said that, it didn't replenish, or she didn't have very much since she left the Priory, and possibly the lands around it. But perhaps if she poured her last store of it into the effort, she could work one upon Sabran. She held her hand toward the... I hate that this dumb saint is gonna get credit for Ede's hard work. She held her hand toward the alabastern tower, cast her Sidon outward, and twisted it into a wreath around the Queen of Innis. As Fyrdal unleashed his fire, so Ede broke the chains on her long dormant power. Flame collided with ancient stone. Sabran vanished into light and smoke. Ede was distantly aware of Truda coming into the belfry, but it was too late to hide what she was doing. Her senses closed in on Sabran. She felt the strain on her braids of protection around the queen, the fire climbing... Braids of protection? That is cool! The fire clawing for dominance, the pain in her own body as the warding gulped away her Sidon. Sweat soaked her corset, her arms shook with the effort of keeping her hand turned outward. When Fyrdal closed his jaws, all was silent. Black vapors billowed from the tower, clearing slowly. Ede waited, hard tight as a drum, until she saw the figure in the smoke. Sabran Berethnet was unscathed. "It is my turn to give you a warning from my forebear," she said breathlessly, "that if you make war against virtudom, this hallowed blood will quench your fire, and it will not return." Fyrdal did not acknowledge her, not this time. He was looking at the blackened stone and the spotless circle around Sabran. A perfect circle. His nostrils flared, his pupils thinned to slits. He had seen a warding before. Ede stood He'd stood like a statue as his merciless gaze roved, searching for her while Sabran remained still. When he looked toward the belfry, he sniffed, and Ede knew he had caught her scent. She stepped out of the shadows beneath the clock face. Fyrdal showed his teeth. Every spine on his back flicked up, and a long hiss rattled on his tongue. Holding his gaze, Ede unsheathed her knife and pointed it at him across the divide. "Here I am," she said softly. "Here I am." The High Western let out a scream of rage. With a push of his hind legs, he launched himself off the Dern Tower, taking part of the spire and most of its east-facing wall with him. Ede threw herself behind a pillar as a fireball exploded against the clock tower. The cadence of his wings faded away. Ede lurched back onto the balustrade. Sabran was still on the balcony in her circle of pale stone. The sword had fallen from her hand. She had not looked toward the clock tower or seen Ede watching her. When Coombe reached her, she collapsed against him, and he carried her back into the alabastern tower. "What did you do?" came a quaking voice from behind Ede. "Truda, I saw you! What did you do?" Ede slid to the floor of the belfry, head lolling. Great shudders pushed through her body. The essence in her blood was spent. Her bones felt hollow. Her skin as raw as if she had been flayed. She needed the tree, just a taste of its fruit. The orange tree would save her. "Oh, honey." "You are a witch!" Truda stepped away, ashen-faced. "Witch, you practiced sorcery! I saw it!" "She saved your fucking queen, you idiot!" "You saw nothing." "It was aromancy," Truda whispered. "Now I know your secret, and it reeks far worse than mine. Let us see how far you can pursue Trium from the pyre." "Ma'am, how are you going to prove that? I wonder." She whirled toward the stair. Ede threw her knife. Even in this state, she struck true. Truda was pulled back with a strangled gasp, pinned by her cloak to the doorpost. Before she could escape, Ede was in front of her. "My duty is to slay the servants of the Nameless One. I will also kill all those who threaten the house of Berethnet," she breathed. "If you mean to accuse me of sorcery before the Virtues' Council, I bid you find some way to prove it, and find it quickly before I make puppets of you and your lover and stab them in the heart. Do you think that because Trium Sulyard is in the east, I cannot smite him where he stands?" Truda breathed hard through her teeth. "If you lay your finger on him..." She whispered, "I will see you burn in Marion Square." "Fire has no power over me." She pulled the knife free. Trita crumpled against the wall, panting, one hand at her throat. Ede turned to the door. Her breath came swift and hot, and her ears rang. She took one step before she fell. Yikes! And of course the next one is East. I want to know what happens! But I do need to go eat, so later.